Hi, my name's Ian and welcome to my channel, or welcome back to my channel if you've been here before. Some of the reviews that we've done, we've covered history of role-playing games and so on, and we have delved into the fact that that role-playing games, or to a large extent, have some origin within war games, especially within war games of the 60s and early 70s. Over the years, many of the role-playing games that then grew out of them have gone back and revisited the wargaming root of things, and we can see that with Traveller in its striker rules and Mayday snapshot, that side of things. We can also see it with Dungeons and Dragons, with its battle system, and then later miniature skirmishes rules, and we can see it in numerous places within role-playing where mass combat rules have been published, introduced, and so on. So the game I would like to do a snapshot, quick, let's just drag something random off the shelf and review it type thing game today, is one of those. Is a game that's connected to a role-playing game and is a war game, and that's this, which is Warlore from Iron Crown Enterprises, published back in 1992. It is associated with the Rolemaster game. The box cover says a mass combat system for use with Rolemaster, which to me sort of seems to indicate that it should be a supplement for Rolemaster, and that's the sort of be all and end all of it. And I disagree with that. I think that statement is not doesn't represent the whole truth of the game. The truth of the game is that it is a standalone game. There are two different modes of play within it, which we'll discuss in a little bit, and it uses Rolemaster concepts, and there are tie-ins back to the role-playing game. So, but Warlore in itself is a standalone game, so you could buy this, probably eBay, whatever. You could buy Warlore and you could play it out of the box without knowing the Rolemaster rules or having any of the other Rolemaster rule books. Familiarity with Rolemaster is a big boon if you're picking up Warlore, because, like I said, the systems that Warlore uses are very reflective of Rolemaster itself. And it's one of the final wave of products that were released for the second edition of Rolemaster. Beyond this, you have a couple of years. So this was 1992, and then you had a couple of other companions, Creature Companion and an Alchemy Companion, Arms Companion, and then eventually in 1994 the final second edition Rolemaster release, which was Sealore. Now, the reason why I've dragged Sealore out along with Warlore is because these two books, releases, whatever, to me are very much related. So what Sealore is a set of naval combat rules, again self-contained, so you could pick up Sealore, and the naval combat rules, ship combat rules, you could use as a standalone game, and it'd be like that. But there are ties back to Rolemaster, so there are naval campaign rules in here. There are profession options and so on that are specific to the naval life. So Sealore itself, naval combat game. Warlore, land combat game, and that's why I see the two as related. So I'll put Sealore aside, and as we open this box, as we go through the contents, you'll see that some of the things that you get with Sealore actually live in this box in my own thing of it, because it's a convenient place to put them. And like I said, I believe the two games to be related. So what do we have in here? We have some unit record sheets. That's fine. We'll deal with them later. We have a map sheet. I will discuss that in a second. We have a book of tables and forms. That's summaries. They're extracted from the main rulebook. We have the main rulebook, which I will delve into in a second. We have Sealore counters. You can tell because they've got ships on them. And we have these, which are the Warlore counters. The number of counters that you get, each counter represents a unit, and each counter has its own unique reference to it. So this is HP 13-4, right? So that unit there is heavy pike, identity 13. And when you look at the reference charts as to the way that you record unit statistics, you'll see that you write these unique references down so you can actually see which counter belongs to which unit. There is a set of light blue ones, there is a set of dark blue ones, and then there's a set of pink ones, right? And they represent pikes and skirmishers and leaders and camps and cavalry units and all sorts, right? You also get a few sets of these, which are status counters, which you can either plonk onto a unit's record sheet, or stick it next to the counter of the unit itself, just to refer to the way it goes, and just to give you a quick idea of what sort of things you are referencing with these. That AMP counter there, or there's a couple of AMP counters there. Those counters are for referencing the morale of a unit. We'll get to it in a bit, but effectively what units do is they accumulate morale penalties that apply to a morale roll to see if the unit starts degrading, running away, and so on. And we've also got these little statuses like that, which just indicate the sort of formation status and readiness level of the unit. So a whole bunch of those. Oh, there's a fired counter there, which you shove next to a missile unit to say that they have actually gone and launched their weapons. Okay, so that's the counter side of it. It is a hex and counter game, and so here is a bunch of sheets of terrain. Now these aren't cut up, and I'll show you why in a second, but the idea was you went and grabbed the sheets, picked the terrain you want off the sheets, cut it up. We've got some hills here, we've got some townscape stuff there, we've got some walls here, some buildings, lakes, rivers, bridges, more walls, more hills, heavy forest, medium forest, light forest, scrub. So these are the terrain options. So what you do is cut these up to the shape of the battlefield that you want to depict, and then you would lay these hex overlays on top of them. There's 4 of those to actually give you the hex references to move your counters around on. And then this gives you a dry erase surface that you can draw roads on, or you can scribble other things during the course of play as you need. So it's generally how it does. However, just these blue sheets here, more Sealor stuff, right? More Sealor stuff. I found that to be a bit of a messy concept. I don't want lots of little chunks of paper to form my playing board. So what I tended to do with Warlore is to draw my own maps. This is an example of a map where I've taken a large hex marked bit of paper, and I've drawn the battlefield that I want. So we've got some scatterings of wood, a band of forest with a slope halfway through it, lots of plains, camp up there, just a monastery or a manor here with a wall around it with a forested area going through, and a track leading up to it. So that's sort of 1 of 4 for quite a large battlefield depiction, but this makes it easier for me. Although you don't have the dry wipe stuff, it does mean that you haven't got bits of paper moving underneath, bits of acetate or plastic or whatever you want to call it, to try and keep your battlefield in order. It's just all here. Very easily folded up and stuffed somewhere in a box. So yes, right. So that's counters, that's maps, that's the basics of the components you get. So let's go and delve into the rules. Now, the rulebook itself looks a bit daunting. It's quite thick. It's about 150 odd pages long, 160 pages long. But like I said, there are 2 different variants of the rules in here, and because it wouldn't be Rolemaster without a bunch of options, there are a whole ton of optional rules in here, and of course, again, because it's Rolemaster, there are a whole bunch of tables. So let's crack into it, and we'll start with what's called the standard game, which is the basic expected way to play it. Now that is not very daunting at all. So if we go to right, so morale is the last one, and then the insert that section there, which is page 5 to page 26. That is the standard rules, and basically the only rules that you need to know to play the game. The rest of it is about creating units and dealing with more advanced concepts in the game, which we'll get into in a second. I'm just going to run through the rules relatively quickly, so you get a sense of what they're about and how they're used, and where they go. So you basically have right. Yeah, you basically have the terrain types that we discussed on the maps. You have the unit types, which we briefly touched on in the counters. The scale of the game, the default scale, is about 50 to 100 people, combatants per counter, represented by counters. The size of a hex is 100 feet across. Now, there are guidelines for expanding on those scales, and the advice is generally says that if you increase one of them, then try and keep everything else in relation to that. So if you're going to increase the size of a hex to 500 feet, then increase the number of people, for example, to 250 to 500 instead of 50 to 100. So increase all of the variables accordingly, so that you are not suddenly getting 2 people standing in the middle of a hex that represents a kilometre. Then you've got the basic unit stats. We went through, have we gone through those now? So I'll show you how these are recorded. So you get a page like this. I'm just going to look at one line from a record sheet. So just mask out all the rest. So that line there represents one counter. So every counter that you have got on the field of play is represented by a line such as this. So I'll go across them. The number column you use to identify the counter that this particular line references. So if you have a look at the counters, you'll see that the counters themselves, that one right in the middle there, has got a specific reference on it. So there are no statistics on the counters. No statistics on the counters like you'll get in some games. All there is a reference. So all the statistics are on the record sheets, and all you're doing there is recording which counter belongs to which particular set of statistics. And then you've got the name of the unit. You then have the name of the unit and the number of combatants that are represented by the counter. Unit type is the nature of the unit, and there are what do we got? Unit types. There we go. So there are only 4 unit types in the game. You've got standard, polearm, cavalry, and miscellaneous. So standard is just foot. Polearm are foot with spears. Cavalry are horsey type stuff, or even camelry or anything else that will come under cavalry. And miscellaneous are things like skirmishes, loose formations, stuff, siloi, that sort of thing. So unlike something like DBA or DBM, for example, where you've got a plethora of blades and everything else, axes and so on, the unit types within Arms Law are very not many. And what it does is it rather than have lots of unit types that cover all sorts of bases, what it has is a few statistics with some categories, and the interaction between the categories of those types then builds the nature of the unit that we're going through. So we'll go through some more of them. So that's UT, unit type. Then we've got offensive bonuses for melee and missile. Those offensive bonuses work in exactly the same way as offensive bonuses in Rolemaster, if you are familiar with that. They are basically the common modifier that is applied to their attack rolls to determine success of an attack. Next one is defensive bonus, or DB. That represents the effectiveness to defend against attacks. SB is shield bonus. Now that's a defensive bonus and in a lot of Rolemaster the shield bonus is sort of folded into the defense bonus a bit. Warlord has specific criteria for the use of shields, so that shield bonus is only comes into play in against attacks that the shield bonus can be effective for. So it's listed separately from DB, from defensive bonus. AT is armor type. That corresponds to Rolemaster armor types, and it ranges in the same way. So you've got the 1 to 20 rating, and that corresponds exactly to the armor types used in Rolemaster. MPT is movement points. Like many hex and encounter games, or many games that use hexes, the cost in movement points between one hex and another depends on its terrain and so on. So units have a movement point total of which they spend to go and enter hexes or change formation or do various things, change facing and so on. Level, we'll deal with that when we come to unit generation, but just suffice to say that each unit has a level and can actually gain levels, gain experience. MR is morale rating. The morale system is quite good in this. The units accumulate morale problems, issues, as they are subjected to various effects, and at the end of every turn you have a morale check to see what happens. There's a morale phase, and you see what happens to them based on the penalties and everything else that they've accumulated. The prepared checkbox there is just an indication of the readiness of the unit. Prepared is a specific state which sort of describes a unit that is G'd up and ready to go. They've had their pep talk. They've been they've had the leader of their Rohirric leader ride up and down the lines, telling them how good it is to go and kill a bunch of orcs today, or they've had their berserkers go and chew on their shields or something like that. So prepared is if your unit is prepared for their particular line and they're a prepared status, you go check that, and then go and rip it out at a later point if they stop being prepared. And then parry state, within Rolemaster, there is a process where you can sacrifice offensive bonus or a portion of your offensive bonus to bolster your defensive bonus, and that's representing your capability to parry with the weapon. You sacrifice your ability to attack with the weapon to increase your ability to defend with that weapon. Parry states for the standard game of Warlord, you can add in. It's an optional thing, but you can add it in, and they simplify it down to say you're either using none, half, or all of your offensive bonus to help your defensive bonus out. And then the casualty state, which is this line of checkboxes at the bottom, just indicates how many. It's the damage, it's the hit points, whatever you want to call it, for the unit. There are milestones like quarter, half, 3/4 of damage where things start to deteriorate. So the more damage a unit takes, the more its capabilities to fight go down. That's basically what that's describing. That's why there's a quarter, half, and 3/4 points marked on the hit points checkboxes, or casualty state checkboxes. And that's basically it. They're the stats for a counter. So we go carry on through all of this. We've got that's described all of that, right? So units sit in a formation. You have to specify what formation the units are in. The formations that are available to you are general order, which is just them milling around, cooking up the bacon, having a cigarette around the back, or something like that. Column order, which is great for moving. The movement costs are lower for column order, but not great for attacking. So the combat penalties that accumulate, or the combat bonuses, or whatever, are not good for that. So column order, good for movement, bad for attack. Then battle order, which is the unit has closed up and is in its shield wall, or in its we're ready to go out and fight type formation. And then routed, which is we're running away, mate. So these diagrams here show where all the different areas of attack are compared to the formation type of the unit is currently in. So for example, we have, let's compare battle order with column order. So battle order, bad for movement, good for fighting. Column order, good for movement, bad for fighting. So if we look at this, there's the counter in the middle. You've got 3 hexes in the front, the front rank, and you've got 2 flanks in the rear. 2 flank positions and then the rear. So most of it is you've got that sort of 180-degree front arc. If you compare that to the column order, then you've only got 2 hexes in front. The 2 hexes directly in front are your front area, and then you've got flank and 2 hexes in the rear. So you've got more of an arc that forms your flank and rear portion of the unit than the sort of 180 thing you've got in your battle order. Not only that, but your different formations carry different penalties and bonuses. So you've got adjustments to your offensive bonus and your defensive bonus, both for melee and missile, and your morale rolls are also going through. So if you're in general order, milling around, then polearm units, there you go, get a penalty to their morale. In column order, your morale bonus is down. If you get attacked and you're still in column order, then you're a bit knackered. And then in battle order, your morale is boosted because all your mates are there. You've got your shield guy next to you, and you're all interlocked and ready to go. Then you've got the morale states. This is what I was saying about the number of different areas that the define a unit, as opposed to just doing has a number of descriptive types. You've got a few descriptive types in a broader range of areas. If you don't play DVM, you don't know the hell I'm on about. Anyway, so morale states, again, we've got prepared. So that's what I was saying earlier about berserkers chewing on their shields and all ready to go and fight. Normal is just they're normal, whatever, just a bog standard position that they're in. They haven't been G'd up, but neither are they despondent. They got disordered, well, things are starting to fall apart, and then you got routed, which is we're running away. And if your morale state is routed, you have to have a routed formation too. Casualty state, that's what we were discussing with the hit points and things. That you hit like full strength, 3/4 strength, half strength, and 1/4 strength, carries an offensive bonus modifier, an offensive bonus modifier, and a morale modifier as well. So the more a counter is damaged, then the less its capabilities and its ability to retain cohesion becomes. And then parry state, that's what we talked about, is an optional thing, either 0, 50 or 100% of your offensive bonus sacrificed to defensive bonus. Leader counters have particular capabilities. They can provide bonuses to the units that are within their general vicinity, the adjacent units, adjacent counters. But leaders are very vulnerable in this game if they end up being isolated. So if there's one bit of advice I can give you is leaders are a great idea but make sure that they are well protected, because they are very easily eliminated should they become isolated, which I suppose is matching reality. Right, so this just describes the counters that we've got. We have the different types of units, so light standard units, heavy standard units, or LS and HS, light pole arms and heavy pole arms, or LP and HP, light cavalry, heavy cavalry, HC, or LC or HC, and miscellaneous, or M, and then a number that identifies the counter, and then what have you. Along with the counters representing the units, you also have counters that represent various aspects of the unit, including its formation, its readiness state, morale state, and also that fired counter there you use to show whether a missile unit has fired. And then where you've got these AMP counters there, they are used to depict the accumulated morale penalty that your unit has suffered through being attacked and generally going through the hell of war. Right, so there we go. Sequence and play. Okay, so you basically have to decide in some way or another who's going to go first and who's going to go second. They can do it by dice roll for initiative if you like. You can also, if the situation warrants it, if it's obvious, usually something like you've got one player as the defender and one player as the attacker, and the attacker goes first because that's what initiates the battle, and so on. So it's in whatever way that you decide what is player A and what is player B. Player A, or side A here, is the ones that go first, and then player B follows on after that. So in a phase, in a turn, if you like, there are several phases. Side A, preparation phase, that just resets everything. Your fired counters that are on your missile units get removed, a number of other bits and pieces, just a bit of start of the turn housekeeping. Then you get to use your missile weapons. You don't have to go and throw every single missile weapon into there. You can keep some back for what's called defensive missile fire, which comes later in the turn, or you can move your units around. A missile unit that's fired can't move, and also a missile unit that's fired takes a penalty to any melee attacks it might get involved in. So if a unit is bearing down on your missile guys, then it might be a good idea to either get that missile counter unit out of the way, or if you can't, then don't have them fire, so they've got some capability left to defend themselves. And then movement. Then side B gets to do its defensive missile fire, so it can fire some or all or none of its missile weapons, usually in reaction to movement, unit movement that you've made. Then the melee phase, there's a battle between any counters that can actually fight each other in melee, and then a morale phase. So you go and check to see the units that have been attacked in that particular block. Do they retain cohesion, or do they go and leg it? And then that's repeated for side B. So side B prep, side B missile fire, side B movement rate, side A defensive missile fire, and then melee and morale phases at the end. Now in both melee and morale phases, then both sides check in each of those, because there may be situations that have cropped up that will adjust their morale modifiers, and therefore it's good to go and check the morale in each. Right, so movement, again, as I said, we have movement costs to go into enter a hex, depending on what your formation is. Then each carries a different cost. Things like slopes and streams and rivers and so on carry a adjustment to the underlying terrain. There are, if you're going on a road, then there are movement points for going onto the road, but then there are no modifiers. These are modifiers to attacking and defending and morale while in your in that particular type of terrain. So you can move along a road and get all of the benefits of the movement point cost reduction, but you gain the terrain modifiers of whatever terrain the road is going through. So if you've got a road that's cutting through light woods, you'd use the road for movement and you'd use the light woods for your modifiers. So that's simple enough. And all of that is basically describing how units can come into contact with each other and how how specifically the different formations work, and how zonal controls work. Then you've got rules for changing formation. Again, changing formation costs movement points. So, for example, going from battle order to general order would take all of your MPs to do, your movement points to do. And disengaging, getting away from whoever you're currently in contact with and fighting. And then stacking, only one counter can exist in a hex at any given time, but you can have friendly counters move through through each other during the game. Right, so the actual way that fighting is done is very similar to Rolemaster, and if you're familiar with Rolemaster rules, you will be really familiar with what's going on in this. So to attack, you start with your offensive bonus of the unit that you're attacking with. You subtract whatever you've sacrificed into your defensive bonus through parrying. You then go and add in the modifier that you've got from your formation state. You saw the tables earlier. And you add in the morale state modifier, add in the casualty state modifier, add in the modifiers, any modifiers that may be due to leaders being in the vicinity. And you add in the position bonus, which is where you've got if you're flanking an opponent and so on, or attacking from the rear. And then this is if you are a unit, a missile unit that has fired and are now engaged in melee for some reason, then you have a penalty for doing that. Then the defensive bonus for the target that you're trying to attack, that starts with the defensive bonus stat, adds in the parry amount, that's what you've sacrificed from your offensive bonus, adds in a formation DB bonus, shield bonus if it's permissible for the direction of attack that's coming in and the type of attack that's coming in, terrain modifiers depending on the terrain that your unit is sat in. And that's kind of all familiar for territory for Rolemaster players. You have an offensive bonus that starts with a stat and then is modified in a bunch of ways, and then you have a defensive bonus that you're attacking against that is modified in a bunch of ways, and ultimately you have the offensive bonus minus the offensive bonus of the attacker minus the defensive bonus of the defender gives you a final adjustment for the roll, a final bonus or penalty for the attack roll. Now, this luck roll is a concept that's added in order to represent the fact that you've got number of people involved. So it's not one counter isn't representative of a single person with a single attack. One counter is actually representing a number of people and a number of attacks. So in order to try and give a more of an element, a random element to what's going on and who can attack who and what's going on, they introduce this luck roll concept. And the luck roll, you roll on this table here. It's an open-ended roll. Just to briefly summarise, if you don't know what an open-ended roll is, it's a percentile dice roll. If you roll 96 or 100, then you roll again and add. If you roll less 5 or lower, then you roll again and subtract. You keep kind of doing that sort of thing until you've stopped rolling 96 or 100s or 5s or lower. Then that gives you a huge berth. It gives you a sort of normal expected mean value in the end, but it extends the fringes out to potentially an infinite number. But the likelihood of that is next to nothing. But it gives you a nice sort of bulky way of doing things, of presenting a large number of outside chances at the fringes, as well as representing the chance that something common will happen. So the luck table it goes all the way. Your expected values are right in the middle, which means that there are no no attack modifier for that particular attack. And then as you get up or down the scale, then you start taking attack penalties if the luck roll is too low, and bonuses if your luck roll is high. So this represents maybe more attacks are landing well within that, or the more opportunities for the figures within represented by the counter to go and attack people, and similarly fewer opportunities to go and bring forces to bear on the lower end of the luck table. So it's exactly the kind of, it's just something that's thrown in there that usually has no effect whatsoever, but can have a marked effect if the extremities of if the table's effects are rolled. So that's just thrown into the mix, as well as the standard offensive bonus minus defensive bonus. You also get the results of the luck table roll. That then, again, Rolemaster players will be familiar with this. There is a table like this for each sort of broad type of weapon. So here we've got one-handed slashing, we've got missile weapons, we've got pole arms, we've got one-handed concussion and two-handed weapons, right? So that's your basic simple weapon types. It doesn't drill down into short sword, long sword, broadsword, whatever. It's just like, you know, one-handed slashing weapon, and that's job done. So you roll percentile dice. You add in the net result of offensive minus defensive plus luck, and then you cross-reference it in one of these tables. So armor type across the top, like I said, mirrors up with the Rolemaster armor types. The roll down the side, cross-reference the two, that gives you a number. The number reference the number indicates the number of casualties, hit points, damage, whatever you want to call it, that you inflict upon the counter that you're attacking. There is also a letter here. Now in Rolemaster, if you're familiar with Rolemaster again, then you would see that the letter refers to some kind of critical hit. Well, in ways that's true of Warlord 2, but the way that that's handled in this thing is provisioning forcing a morale penalty onto the defending unit. And the higher the letter, so there's A, B, C, D, so all the way down to F, then the greater the penalty that you are applying. And these penalties, this AMP stands for accumulated morale penalty. These penalties are accumulated. So the more damage you do to a unit, the more you add or subtract, whichever you want to go, the greater you are forcing its AMP to be, and so the more likely it is that that unit is going to break and run through a failed morale check. So, like in Rolemaster combat, your character is more likely to die from a critical hit than through loss of hit points. Similarly, your unit is more likely to exit the game through failing a morale test than it is through taking damage. Okay, so that's basically how attacks work. Then once you've sorted out all the attacks, you end up with the morale phase. So we've done melee missile attacks and everything else. We come to the morale check phase, and this is this table referencing here. You have the morale rating, the MR, that is listed on the statistics for the unit. You have a modified roll, which is the percentile roll with all of the factors that bonuses, penalties, whatever, for the morale check-in, and you cross-reference it. The modifiers that go into this are summarised here. So we get the formation state. So if you're in a formation, if you're in battle order, then you get a bonus. If you're attacked when you're in column order, then you get a penalty. Morale state modifier, so depending on where you are in the your current morale status, then you get a modifier for that. Casualty state modifier, so the more damage that your unit has taken, the more people that has been lost, then the higher penalty that it's going to take. Leader modification, again, if you've got a leader in vicinity to the unit, it can help to bolster the morale. Terrain modifier, if you're in certain terrains that help you defend yourself or whatever, then you are going to get a bonus to your morale. If you're out in the open, then not so much. and then your accumulated morale penalty, the AMP, that is inflicted upon you by attacks done against you through from other counters. So these results here, the A, B, C letters, that you have to record as the game progresses. And finally, you've got this plus 50 bonus if the unit was not attacked during the current turn. So if you manage to retreat a unit to safety and give it a couple of turns to recover, its morale can actually improve, and you can shake off the effects of AMP and so on. So when we get to this table, there's a number of different results in the table. X means units gone, that's it, finito, bye bye, it's El Dedo. And R means that they are now routed and have to be treated accordingly, so according to both morale and formation. D means that they've dropped down to disordered, so this effectively units step down a step in the preparedness status. So if they are prepared, they go down to normal, normal goes down to disordered, disordered go down to routed, and routed units just stay as routed. Then the modifier here, the number, gives you a modification to the AMP. So your morale doesn't necessarily adjust, but your AMP, it's a degradation in the morale without tangible effects at this time, except your next morale check is going to be a bit tougher to make. And then the final result on this table is these eyes all the way down the bottom here on the high end of the roll, which are improvements. So for the way that goes, the status state can be going. So your routed units can go to disordered. Disordered units can become normal. You can't create a prepared unit from a normal unit because of morale improvement. That doesn't happen. But if you are at a normal status and you get an improved result in morale, then your AMP is reduced to 0, so it wipes it all out. And this is where this plus 50 comes into good play here. So if you manage to get that unit out the way, protect it so it's not being attacked, it's got a better chance of getting down at this end of the table, getting an improved result, and if it can recover long enough, then it could lose the AMPs, and it's the AMP results that accumulate over time and that really do the damage, because they end up forcing the unit more towards these X's, which are instant doom. And that is it as far as the game is played. After the game has been played, then you can use this to determine what the effects of the tangible effects on a unit that have that play has inflicted upon it, that the battle has inflicted upon it. So as part of the game, it's not damage inflicted, casualties inflicted onto a counter, onto a unit, are not wholly representative of individual combatants being killed. They are reflective of combatants being reduced in their ability to go and fight, and that could be through exhaustion, through injury, through being killed, through whatever. It just means that the degradation of the unit as a whole, for whatever reason, due to the effects of combat as it goes through, reduction of the unit's capabilities. So after the fight, you then can go through this to determine what that actually means in terms of dead people and how many people have survived from this unit and so on, which can then also fold into, see this section here about player character and non-player characters, so heroes and so on, as to whether they actually suffered during the what fate they suffered during the course of the battle, if they were part of a unit. There you go. Right, so that's the standard game. Takes up the first part of the rule book. Moving on to creating units and leaders. This is basically Lego. You make a bunch of you select a bunch of options. This is creating units and leaders for the standard game. So you select a bunch of options, and then those go forward into creating the statistic lines for the counters, right? So these, what statistics you fill in for your units here, are determined by just a couple of pages of rules for generating units. Then again, optional rules we're going through. So you've got options for player characters involved in a standard warlord game, player characters as leaders within that game, player characters as combatants within that game, spellcasters, spellcaster units. We got this is offensive bonus modifications due to the type of attackers versus the type of defenders. So we can see that, for example, a cavalry attacking pole arms takes a penalty, while cavalry attacking your skirmishers and whatever takes a bonus, and so on. So this makes things a bit more detailed when you're now referring this type of unit attacking that type of unit, which is, you know, very DBA, DBM, Field of Glory type things, very common in war games where you're comparing the different types of units and their effectiveness against each other. And yeah, some just more rules about generating casualties and so on. Lots of different options. Right. Charging, morale, recovery, formation, and so on. Then it goes into a bit of an example, some sample units, and then you end up with this, which is the refereed game. Now you don't need a referee to play this. So I think it may be the advanced game is probably a better title for it, but however, it is set up with the assumption that there is a referee involved, a game master involved, and it's this part of the game, it's this variant in the game that is aimed more towards integration between Warlord and Rolemaster itself. Now, this is where things start getting a little bit chunky. So most of the rest of this is going through the refereed game. So I'm not going to I'm not going to go specifically into this, because if you're familiar with Rolemaster, it's more likely you're familiar with Rolemaster and this is what you're interested in, and you're interested in a mass combat system that works with Rolemaster. This is probably what you'll be looking at and a way to integrate the game in. So you'll be already familiar with many of the different concepts, so there's no point in me going over it. And we've also, they're not too dissimilar from the standard game. It does give you a lot more options in fiddling around, and like we've got this, that messing around with the time scale, for example, and also with unit sizes and distances involved on the map and so on. This version of the game also lends itself better to function with miniatures and measurements rather than hexes, but it works equally well to go for the hex and counter basis that the standard game uses. Right, so lots of different things where you've got units and leaders, command control. The sequence of play, it's similar to Rolemaster. So you've got the game master phase, which is the game master doing the things that he needs to do in bookkeeping and so on. Spell phase, spellcasting and so on. Spell resolution phase, which is where everything that's to do with magic is sorted out. Missile phase, missile resolution phase. Movement phase. Opportunity action phase, reactions from what's going on. Your unit was waiting for that unit to do that kind of thing. Melee phase, melee resolution phase, and then morale phase. So that's how it's all sort of laid out there. Movement and maneuver. This is more done by pace, similar paces to the way that Rolemaster does it. So you're going through that. Maneuvers that you can do. Same with like movement. If you're within a Rolemaster, I'm going to assume that you're familiar with Rolemaster if you're delving into this thing. So you've got your difficulties for your movement maneuvers, and your units will perform movement maneuvers based on a iteration of the movement maneuver table. Attacks, they use the luck roll again, but the luck roll in this case uses a much more expanded version. So the luck roll was very simple for the standard game, and the luck roll for the advanced game, the referee game, if I can actually find the table for it. Luck table. Okay, so this is the luck table for the refereed game, where you need to know the number of attacks that the counter, the individuals that the counter is representing are making in order to work out the bonus or penalty that is being generated from the luck roll. So that's so luck is a bit more is more expansive in this version of the rules than in the standard game. And then we've got the similar. You work out the total offensive bonus. You work out the total defensive bonus. You go and subtract one from the other and go through. So you've got things like this total unit attack modifier, which is TUUM, and then you can go through this. So there we've got modifiers from the total hits kind of taken, again, where the standard game just goes, at quarter, half and 3/4. Here we've got 0 to 24%, 24 to 50%, and so on. Just, it's more sort of fine granularity to it. Not a huge amount, but we go through. And then rules for so critical hits. So yes, the attacks themselves as well. You're breaking them down into specific types of weapon. So what we've got here, let's go through. So trample, stomp for 4 clears, start stinger. Yeah, these are the natural weapon type things. Then you've got martial arts. So all of these tables, hand axe, main gauche, all of these tables a Rolemaster player will be very familiar with. And they're done in the similar kind of way as well. So you end up with the armor type. You've got hit points of damage and the casualties inflicted. You'll see that some of these are in decimals, so you've actually got to record fractional casualties and so on against the rolls that are made. So it's damage versus what have you. So. And when they're going about large creatures, then the number of casualties inflicted against a large creature can indicate the critical strikes that you go through, or you can use casualty multipliers against a creature's large creature or whatever, super large. What do you got to do? So signing on out, so you can do split and attack and defense. That's basically adjusting between your total attack modifier, similar way to your sacrificing OB to DB. Formations again. So area attacks and stuff like that. So there's a lot of stuff on spells, but also the area attacks apply to siege weaponry. More on spells. And then morale, you can see that the rules for morale are a lot more extensive too. And also, instead of the simplified version of the morale table, which is like your unit is destroyed, or it takes an accumulated morale penalty, or effects and those kind of all sorts of things that you do there. Instead of that, you have effectively, I suppose, you could say it's a morale critical hit table, because the way that it functions is similar to that. There we go. So a morale failure, depending on the type of failure that you're suffering, and a die roll is the results that go through. So similar to things like that, you've got unit is at -20, 15% of desertion per round, and you've got 60% desertion per round. Leader leaves to take up farming. There's one good thing about Rolemaster, it's the critical tables. They go 50% of the unit surrenders, the rest go and rout. If spectacular magic has been used during battle, it surrenders, otherwise it routs. Then unit surrenders over leaders' protests. Troops make a last stand with an offensive bonus at +20 and a defensive bonus at -20, literally fighting to the death. It's usually sort of ones in the middle. There's your 66. So we've got A, morale failure 66. Leaders, poor enunciation causes unit to retreat. Cross signals result in immediate enemy attack at +20. Questionable joke inspires troops to -50 morale rating. Spectacular blunder by leader causes whole unit to desert. Permanent -3 hits to his leader rating. Leader's ineptitude causes all of his troops to rout. They'll never fight for him again. So yeah, a lot more detail in the effects of morale. And correspondingly, you get a lot more in the way of detail when it comes to generating units. And now that's where we get the forms and sheets that I was dragged out of the box earlier. Let's see if I can find it now. The way this, I think, is where Warlord for me shines, or is different from a lot of other games, because what you're doing is you're generating a unit as a character, and the unit itself develops skills. It has statistics and characteristics for it. It can gain in level. It gains experience points. It has skill development points, same way as characters do, and so on. So what this unit generation rules, what they are, follow through. But what the unit generation rules are doing here is a character generation at the unit level. So you've got, what have we got? Unit statistics. So, like a standard character has strength, intelligence, and so on. Here you've got discipline and survivability and ferocity and endurance. You've got morale rating, obviously offensive bonus, defensive bonus, armor type, hit points, size, casualties, leadership rating, experience level, unit-based movement rate, primary weapon it uses, secondary weapon, and its development points, and so on. So all of these things are some of the terms may be familiar with you from a Rolemaster basis. Some of them might be slightly unfamiliar to you, but they're all on a line of treating a unit as a character. So then we've got unit types, and this extends beyond the idea of that you've just got unit types that are fighting unit types. You've got also here, you've got support unit types. You've got animal handlers and armourers and medical stuff and so on. And then combat unit types, you've got cavalry and infantry and navy and so on. All of these unit types, you have basic skills and related skills that go forward to the way that the skills are developed. So with your basic skills, you have a list of basic skills, and this set of skills is different from normally. Straightforward selection that requires the use of one of a unit's basic skills automatically succeed, unless the GM rules that special circumstances require a manoeuvre roll, and so on. So the basic skills are their specialities, and then related skills are the ones that they, related but not within their speciality. So yeah, lists the unit types again, and then you've got this block of skills that are relative to army. So you've got things like campsite prep, you've got heraldry, you've got message memorization, record maintenance, hospital, feeding, fall into formation. What else you got? Armor evaluation, so on. So there's a number of skills that are specifically related to unit level type things, and a description of the skills. Formation skills, just as you can see, the formations that are the units within the more advanced game can go into are more so than the 4 that you get in the standard game. This is all still a description of unit generation. It'll come to leader generation. So this then goes to creating the leadership. You have the leadership in the military organisation skill. and the recruitment skill. They all fall into the ability of the leader to go and put a force together and then effectively lead it. So unit generation. So now we've got the leaders, we've got the command structure there. That all folds into that way that the effectiveness of those leaders to go and build a unit around them and what nature that is going to take. So yeah, for example, recruiting, use the recruiting skill. How does that go and recruiting attempts, so they can roll a recruiting skill check to see if they do that. Then advancing in levels, so they've got training and getting skill points and more skill points to go and develop the unit skills better. And then, ta-da, we're now into the optional material for the more advanced game. So we've got about troop maintenance, making sure they're paid, making sure they're fed. We've got more on siege weapons. We've got more on armor type, helping people to survive when you're determining who's died and who's not at the end of a game. Then their armor type can fold in and help them survive. If you've got your plate mail, you're more likely to be fished off the battlefield, incapacitated but alive. Whereas if you've got a lighter armor, you're more likely to be fished off the battlefield in pieces. Siege weaponry, using exhaustion points, messing around with the turn sequence, all sorts of other stuff that they're basically destroying things. And then we're into the tables that you've seen me flick to. These tables are all connected to the advanced version of the game rather than the standard version. So there you go. So what you've basically got is a really short game, standalone game in the standard game. You've got pretty quick system of generating units within the standard game. Then you've got a more extensive character generation process, method of creating units as part of the refereed game or the more advanced game, and a lot more options and complexity involved, not more nuance involved in the refereed game than there is in the standard game. And there you go. That is Warlore in a nutshell, really. The summary sheets, they've got, the standard tables for the standard game. There's your standard game luck table. Then you've got your standard game combat things, standard game record sheets. Then these sheets here are for a referee. If you're familiar with Rolemaster, you'll know that the combat reference sheets that referees can keep on a round by round basis to see what characters are up to. The unit record sheets, which are effectively character sheets for units, and then some more of the luck table for the advanced game and so on. And there you go. So that's Warlore. In my estimation, the standard game is a neat little package. I quite like it. It is very quick. It's simpler than a lot of war games out there, and it does tie into Rolemaster, so you can actually expand on what the standard game stats give you into a more broader sense of things. The page that it gives you at the end about how to deal with character involvement is quite good. It's a very simple way of doing it. It can actually be very lethal for player characters, especially if they're involved in ranks or if they're part of a leader counter that ends up being isolated. But that's sort of par for the course. War is not particularly built around being able to survive in one piece. The opportunities to get yourself hurt are plentiful. The advanced game, the refereed game, depends on what you want to do. If you want to I think if you are building a campaign around military operations, if you've got like the player characters are the leaders that are recruiting, that are operating maybe a mercenary force or something like that, then the refereed game is almost perfect for that. They get to directly develop the character of their units, or the units under their command, and they get to manage them. They get to spend their skill points and see where they go with that. If you're using it as a one-off in order to depict a mass battle in a campaign that is otherwise not mass battle oriented, I would say stick with the standard version of the game. I don't think going into the depth that the refereed version of the game affords is worth the extra work in order to just depict a mass battle in a normal campaign that isn't focused on mass battles. So that's my summary opinion is the standard game should be the one that you are using most often in a normal game of Rolemaster that involves the odd large battle here and there. The refereed game is the model that you should be using if you want a very focused military based campaign with the player characters acting as leaders and primary movers and drivers of that military unit. There you go. So that is Warlore. So in a future video I may touch a bit more on Sea Law, which I mentioned at the start is I believe to be a related companion piece to Warlore, or that's the way I treat it, and delve into what all that wonderful material is about, because to me Sea Law is one of the best nautical role-playing supplements that's been produced across the board of any of the games I play. So that's for a later video. I don't know when, but when the wind takes me to do that. But there you go. In basic, there you go. Warlore. Fun game. Standalone game. If you want to play a war game that can grow to encompass all sorts of various options, then fair one to pick up. I would not suggest that it is the best to pick up in that regard. I would suggest that it is the best that is associated with Rolemaster. So if your focus is Rolemaster and you want to introduce mass battles into your campaign, or you enjoy the Rolemaster rules and you would like to play a war game that uses similar concepts, then go and hunt a copy down. So until next time, I've got to go and rush off to the annals of scouting, and I will talk to you again at some point. So until the next time, take care.